You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wood.
And I'm Jennifer Connor.
From Equestrian Businesswomen, and you're listening to Equestrian B2B, the podcast that brings together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and equestrians for conversations about how they build and sustain a successful business.
On today's show, we talk to Delia Nash about her experience in research and development, international sales, and winning the Grade 1 Golden Shaheen Race in Dubai.
Delia Nash has served as the Vice President of Sales and Director of New Business Development for Kentucky Performance Products, LLC, for the past 15 years. Prior to this, she worked in the equine nutrition research and development field. Nash became a partner in Kentucky Performance Products in 2017. One of her major responsibilities as Director of New Business Development is to oversee the research and development of all new products. In her role as VP of Sales, she travels the globe introducing Kentucky Performance Products supplements to a wide variety of audiences.
Delia has spent more than 20 years overseeing and participating in equine nutrition research, primarily in the areas of vitamin E, bone metabolism, and more recently with a focus on glucose and insulin regulation. She is a contributing author on several published papers and also holds a patent on nutritional compositions for use in treating and preventing equine metabolic syndrome. She earned her Master's of Science in Equine Nutrition from the University of Limerick in her native Ireland. She lives on a farm in central Kentucky where she breeds thoroughbred racehorses. Join us at the 2023 Saratoga Women in Business Spectacular on July 11th through 16th at White Hollow Farm in Stillwater, New York. With this year's theme of wellness, prosperity, and wisdom, you can hear from speakers, listen to panels, participate in activities, and network at our cocktail party. Mark your calendar to save the dates now and stay tuned to hear more from equestrian businesswomen about the schedule and exciting news to come. Hi, Delia. It's so nice to have you on and have you join us today. It was great catching up with you at Cornell a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and I'm really happy and excited to have you on.
Thank you very much. Excited to be on and have been listening to some of the podcasts during the week, and you do a fantastic job. So very happy to be on.
Thank you. We wanted to jump right in and get started talking a little bit about your education and the company, your experience in university.
Okay, well, like everything in life, I took a wrong turn before I took a right turn. But I'm a firm believer in sometimes you got to make a couple of mistakes before you figure things out. So initially, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And thankfully, that didn't pan out because I would have made a terrible veterinarian because I don't have the patience for it. So things happen for a reason. So in Ireland, our school system is a little bit different than the US. We have to pick, even though we don't call it our major, but it's the equivalent of picking your major when we graduate, the equivalent of high school. So at 18, when we enter college, we've had to already decide what track we're going down. So I didn't get into vet school, thankfully. And my next choice, I really enjoyed chemistry in school. So my next choice was an applied chemistry degree. And let's just say that didn't work out so good for me. I applied myself, but it wasn't to my studies. Being serious, I got in there. And yes, I did love chemistry, but it was very much a very scientist type track, and that just wasn't me. I mean, it was way too much white coat and laboratory type environment for me. So instead of backing out, I decided, well, I kind of like this university. So I had a great year. I didn't really study because I had made the decision that it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Well, needless to say, I didn't do very well when the exams rolled around. So I had to kind of retool. So then I ended up, that university was University College Galway. So then I ended up reapplying and doing equine science degree at the University of Limerick. And that kind of got me going on the right track, really where my interests were. So, you know, like I say, sometimes you've got to make a mistake to figure out the right road.
Oh,
For
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Sometimes you have to be thankful for what didn't work out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there was two things there that didn't work out, because I'm being serious. I would not have made a good vet. I mean, as you know, Jen, we interact with them on a daily basis, and I have nothing but admiration for what they do, but it is not the profession for me. I'm much happier on the side of the commercial side, supporting them and providing them with products. But I just would have made a terrible vet, because I do. Patience is not something that I would be known for.
And what were you doing with horses, like growing up, and how did you have the equine interest?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and we always had horses. That love of horses I got from my dad. So from the time I could walk, I was surrounded by horses. So that was always a big love of mine. So I was always going to be some way engaged with horses. I guess initially growing up, I thought that the only way to really make a career out of that was to go down the veterinary channel. Obviously, being out in the world now, I realized that there's so many opportunities. But in my own narrow mind back then, I think it was like the veterinary track, or else it'll just have to be a pastime and earn my living elsewhere. But thankfully, I've learned different.
Right.
What part of Ireland are you from?
I'm from County Limerick, so it's down south. It's a pretty decent horse county, but very much known for its dairy farms. But there's plenty of horses, and a lot of Irish people are very connected to the horse, regardless whether they're actively involved in the horse industry or not. There's definitely a true connection with the horse, so you're never too far away from horse-related people.
Yeah.
And did you ride, or were you more involved with thoroughbreds?
Actually, I wasn't involved with thoroughbreds at all. We did the show jumping scene as kids. My dad would have been a bit of a wheeler and dealer in ponies, so if there was a good pony, generally didn't stay around for too long. But that was a good education as well. So, but I had friends that were involved in the thoroughbred industry, but my family, we were never involved in the thoroughbred industry. And how I got involved in the thoroughbred industry was when I did finally get on the right career track, and doing the equine science degree. The University of Limerick at the time, they had a 8-month work experience period in the second year of our degree, and they did the placements, and that placement, it needed to be on a breeding farm. And you could stay in Ireland, but if you wanted to go abroad, they would help facilitate that as well. So I think it was 13 or 14 of us came to Kentucky, and that's kind of where I got involved in the thoroughbred industry. And I've never looked back. I almost made another career mistake at that stage, because when we came here for 8 months, we worked hard, but we played hard as well. And it was just a fantastic experience. And, it was just a wonderful experience. And I didn't want to go back. I still had 2 years to do my degree. And there was a few of us that were thinking, we've tasted the money in our pocket, we're working, and it's such a great place to be, that we just couldn't stomach the thought of having to go back for 2 years. But thankfully I did. I think my dad would have came over and pulled me back anyway, because I wasn't coming home. So I don't think I would have gotten away with that decision, but thankfully I weighed that one up for a little bit longer and made the right decision.
Yeah. So having the kind of early school experience in the US and knowing kind of the market elsewhere, what's your thought on the difference in equine nutrition in the United States versus international markets?
I think in the modern era, there are differences for sure, but I think the way performance horses, be it race horses, dressage, eventing, show jumping horses, or whatever, that they're so tightly managed anymore that there's not a huge difference in the nutrition. And I guess by that, what I mean is that in most countries, these performance horses are in stalls for a big part of the day. So Possibly in Europe, there is more turnout than what I see here in the US, especially on the racetrack, because it's a different setup. Most people are training from their own facility, so they have that ability to get them out into small paddocks for a little kick and a buck around most days. But as regards, very few performance horses are getting significant amount of grass in any given day. So I think in broad terms, I don't see a huge difference in nutrition. Obviously, in different countries, you have to adapt to climates. We do quite a bit of business in the Middle East, in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and obviously they have extreme temperatures there and don't have grass.
Right.
So, there are some challenges there, and they would use a lot more electrolytes, have some issues with sand colic and things like that. But the general nutrition side of things, I think a lot of feeds, we're all using the same type of grains. We're all fortified feeds now, so I don't see massive differences there. And there's a lot of overlap in the companies that are supplying the feed as well.
Yeah.
Especially when I go to the Middle East, I see a lot of the European companies are actually supplying the feed to the Middle East.
Right.
So I don't think it's as different now as maybe it was 15, 20 years ago. And it's such a small world in the equine world, and there's so much transit of horses. I think there has to be kind of a standardization of the products that are available and the feeding routine. So I don't see massive differences.
Yeah.
There are some little bit of difference in grains and stuff that would be used just that are more native to one country to the other. But when you dig down on it, the amount of carbohydrates, fiber and stuff like that, it's balanced. And again, we're all fortifying feeds with the vitamins and minerals, which is probably something that was missing a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. And you said you did a study abroad program in Kentucky during your university years. When did you actually make the move to the US?
So I was here first in 96, and that was part of the work experience while I was still in university. And I graduated in 98. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it was 98 I graduated. And I was kind of over and back. I would come here for the summers and do sales, and did 2 breeding seasons at home. And then in 2000, I moved here permanently.
Okay.
So when I was in university, I definitely got very focused on the nutrition side, and that's really where my interests were. And that's, I kind of decided that's where I wanted to progress. And so once I moved here in 2000, that's where my career has focused on since then.
Mm-hmm. And how did you move into having a company that does those products?
Well, when I initially moved here in 2000, I was working more in research and product development, and I was managing a research facility for Kentucky Equine Research. And I would not change that time for anything. But again, it was very much a research environment.
Yeah.
And I love the research and I love the science, but I also love the commercial side of things. Yeah. So I always kind of wanted to move into the commercial side, but the experience that I got in those 6 years, I think has been a huge part of how I've progressed since. And it certainly gives me, I don't know if you call it an advantage, but it's certainly a big plus to me when I'm detailing product, especially to the veterinarians. I understand the product from the concept, and some of these products I have been involved from the concept through, and I'm not coming in looking at the research afterwards. I'm seeing the research as it comes in, and with some of the products, I actually did the research back in the early 2000s. So I think that's been I wouldn't change that for the world, but long term, again, I think it takes a very certain type of person to work in research and laboratory side of things for their entire career.
Yeah.
And that to me is a very focused and detail oriented person. And if you really wanted to take me apart, there are not two things that you would say that I'm more the bigger picture and can get very bored with the small details. But thankfully, I during those 6 years, I did find it extremely interesting. And I think I did pay attention in those 6 years, but I don't think it was something that I would have been happy doing forever. And in my opinion, if you're not happy doing it, you're not going to do it well. And so I think the timing was perfect when this opportunity opened up to come and work for Kentucky Performance Products. And in my first couple of years here, I was still very much on the technical side with a little bit of sales exposure, and things just evolved. Then that I moved a lot more into the commercial side. And then in 2017 was offered the opportunity to become a partner in the company. So that's been a great opportunity for me, and it's something that I always wanted to do. Some people, they don't want to have the headaches of having their own company. I was the opposite, because I'm a firm believer. And again, it's different people for different courses, but to me, I think you have headaches regardless. And, in work environment and in business. And I prefer them to be my headaches and work through them and resolve them than to be working for somebody else. And that's just my personality,
Oh yeah, definitely.
I like working for myself. I like the challenges that it brings. So that's something that was always on my radar. And, I think my business partner in this company now, she recognized that, and, thankfully gave me the opportunity to move into ownership.
Nice.
Okay, I want to go back a minute because I want to ask you, do you do any work in South Africa?
We do not, and I have never been to South Africa.
I was just curious because I have a friend who went to South Africa, and she had a horse and she took it over there. And I was thinking when you were talking before about nutrition, and I was like, she was feeding peanut leaves to her horse.
Wow.
And she had shipped him in from France, and it was like this whole thing because he was not doing well when he first got there. But I was thinking of all the places, if that was one of the places you went, because that was like a very interesting experience that she had, and questions that she had that she asked us. She was actually on the podcast on like our second episode, and Jen and I just laughed about her experience over there because it was super wild.
Well, yeah, no, I have not been to South Africa. A lot of our international business is focused in the Middle East and some in South America, and then a little bit in Europe.
Yeah. Okay. So can you kind of talk to us about like your product development process and the steps that you take to start thinking about a new product, and how you get there?
Yeah, and it's not like there's a cookie cut approach, but I would say that the things that generally stimulate a product idea will be one that I see a need for it when I'm out and about. And that's something that I'll always ask our customers and the vets about. Is there a product that you need that we don't have? Is there a particular challenge that you're having that you don't see a solution out there for? So that's one way that we get ideas. Sometimes we're obviously aware of a particular issue and we know that there's not a good product there for it. So that will stimulate an idea, and then from that you then have to start looking at different ingredients that might have a benefit to that, and then you come up with a formula, and once you come up with the formula, then you have to test it obviously and see if there is actual efficacy from it. So to get to that point, there is a lot of digging through the literature, because a lot of the good ideas are the on the supplement side of the ingredients that we'll come up with to look at. They're probably ingredients that there's been a lot of work done maybe in humans or even rodents, and then you have to try and apply that to the horse. But for us, that's just to get us to a stage where we have a formula to test. I mean, there are some companies then that will put that product on the market based on that kind of literature review from other species. For us, it's a way to get to a test formula. And then we generally will look and see who are the experts in that particular field that we're studying, and approach them to, do a study and see if there's actually some efficacy behind it. So, that's generally the approach, and the time span on that can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years and even longer.
Wow.
An example is we've got a product now for metabolic syndrome, and that's something that was on our mind for, I would say, 5 or 6 years before I actually had a formula to test, because we were aware equine metabolic syndrome is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and there really was very little out there to address it. Even from the pharmaceutical side of things, there was very little out there to address it. So we were constantly thinking from a nutrition aspect. Obviously, you don't want to give them a lot of grain and you don't give them access to grass, but as regards something from the nutraceutical side that could help those guys, there wasn't anything out there. And there was one particular ingredient that I had always been a big fan of, from the literature that I saw on the human side. But two things, well, I guess one main thing stopped me from moving forward with it, and that was it was extremely expensive ingredient. And by the time you up the dose to what would be equivalent for a horse, in my opinion, it was going to be at a price point per day that people just weren't going to buy it. And we have to be conscious of that. We're not looking to be the most economical product on the market, but we also can't have a product that's going to be $8-9 a day, because very few people are going to use it.
Yeah.
It's obviously, from a commercial standpoint, from us, it's obviously a bust, but then people get very frustrated because they see a product that can help, but they can't afford it. So we don't want to get into that situation. So I didn't move forward for several years until I was able to come up with a formula. I kept digging through the literature, and I finally found some other ingredients that showed some synergy. So my theory was that I was going to be able to use less of this ingredient with these other ingredients and still have an effective product. And it turned out that it was actually more, it showed more efficacy combined at a lower level than the ingredient on its own had shown.
Yeah.
So, but it took a long time to get to that.
Right.
That's the product that's the formula that I have the patent on, but it took a long time to actually get to a formula, not to mind the testing phase.
Right.
With that study, we did the work at Michigan State University on that product. That's been an exciting product to be involved with.
Is that on the market now?
It is. It's a product called Insulin Wise.
Okay.
And it's I think we launched it in 2018. At the end of 2018, it was launched at AEP, and it's been a fantastic product for us, and it really is helping those metabolic horses. But again, it took a long time, but it was worth every second of it. It was, and not all products are successful at that.
Right.
Sometimes you go and do the research and you don't get the results that you're hoping for, or you rarely find out in research that the product didn't work. What you find out is it didn't work under those circumstances.
Right.
But it's difficult to draw a conclusion from research saying this is dubbed. It doesn't work, but you often find out under those circumstances that it was tested, or under that level that it didn't work. But generally, I think in research, if you answer one question and you end up with 9 more questions, it's probably a pretty good outcome from research.
Yeah.
But it tends to throw up more questions than it answers. But if you get 1 or 2 answers, you're in good shape.
It must have been so satisfying to see that product kind of hit the shelves and have it start helping horses after such a long process.
It is. It really is, and just when you're out there and you hear some of the success stories, that's just a great feeling, because obviously we're a commercial company. We have to make money, and that is a big goal. But we also want to provide good quality products that provide solutions to people we don't ever want to sell somebody something that they don't need, and I've often talked to customers and they'll say, I've got this going on, and would your product help? And if I think it won't help, I tell them, I don't think it's going to help in that situation. You can try, but I don't think it's going to help you in that situation, because to me, making the first sale has no significance. It's when you have somebody that comes back and buys your product 2, 3, 4 times, then you have a customer, and you're not going to achieve that unless you're honest with the people in the get-go. And I can't sell something to somebody if I don't believe in it myself. I can be very persuasive if I believe in it, because I feel like I'm helping that person. But if I couldn't sell products that don't have data and research behind it either. I have to have the confidence in the product. Then I can transmit that confidence, I hope, to the customers. But I don't ever want to sell somebody something that's just for the sake of selling it. That will give me zero satisfaction. And in fact, it probably will make me feel really bad about myself.
And you said you did, you do a lot of research. What does that look like? Is it literally just sifting through papers online and finding things? How do you?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And again, you may have an idea of a product in your mind, and the first place to start is sifting through PubMed to see what published papers are out there. And, one paper kind of leads to another. Sometimes there's nothing,
right.
Especially in horses. And then you have to look at other species. Then there may be very little there either.
Right.
But, you kind of have to continuously dig through, because sometimes it is there. You've just looked, you've put in the wrong search phrase, or you're thinking the wrong way. And that's why, you just have to keep those things floating around. And just when I have some spare time, do a search again or whatever. And it's an evolving process. You don't just sit down and everything comes together and you put it together and you call the university and say, okay, we're ready to do the study. I mean, I wish it was like that. But,
yeah, it'd make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, it would. But, when you look back on the process, you think, okay, it's good that it took that long, because there's a lot of things that I had presumed in the initial start of this that were not right. And, if I just kind of skipped a few steps, I wouldn't have been aware of that. So, it's something that, to be viable as a company, you kind of have to have several of those things moving along at the same time at different phases. Because otherwise you're just going to go for very long periods without anything new. And you're still going to do that. I mean, we're a small company. We're not, it's not like we got a big research team from the product development side in-house. It's me. Now, we do utilize, we've got a very good consultant that I work with. And then, like I say, we develop very good relationships with the universities and the experts there. And that's, that's a two-way relationship, because they appreciate the funding. And that's the other thing about going to university. If you do a study, you're losing control. They need to publish it.
Right. So if it doesn't work out for you, they still have to make it public.
Exactly. So if you want to call it a risk, I don't see it so much as a risk, because for us, if we don't see some efficacy, we don't want to put our name to it anyway.
Right.
So, but if you're the type of company that you're going to sell this regardless, and you're just hoping that you get some nice data to even develop your story further, well, then it is a risk. But, and I think sometimes you don't have the full story going, but you have enough to go to market and enough to show that there is efficacy and there is an application for it. And then you just kind of build on it from there. Then you kind of see the next phase. Maybe it might work in this situation as well. But then that's the next phase of the study, and you don't go out there telling people it's going to work over here until you know that. So, we could be doing research like Elevate Vitamin E. That's been a huge product for us. And that's been something that's a little bit of a different approach, because You can say there's nothing novel about vitamin E. Vitamin E, what's the big deal? Well, it's the source of it and the bioavailability. And that's what we've done a lot of work on through the years. And we continue to do a lot of work on that and showing not only the bioavailability benefits, but the different applications. And, we've had some great relationships with, again, some of the key researchers in the neuromuscular diseases in that aspect, Dr. Finno at UC Davis and Dr. Valberg, who's now at Michigan State and was at University of Minnesota. We continue to do work with both of those, and that's been a fantastic product for us, and something that I did the original research on that product back in 2001, 2002.
Wow.
Here we are 20 plus years in, and there's still, data coming out on that product. So, and that's the other thing about, for us, the life cycle of a product, it's a gradual increase. So some companies, they'll put a huge amount of marketing in the first year, and they'll have that massive growth.
Yeah.
And then it'll, start to level off and then go through the decline phase, where, again, because we're a small company, we'll grow it gradually, and we look at the first 3 years still as the introductory phase. So we're not looking for gangbuster sales. We're just looking to see that steady increase and to get the positive feedback from the marketplace as well. But the Elevate is a good example. We're 20 plus years in, and that product is still growing.
Wow.
And you said it's the schools or the universities that do the trials for your product or your idea?
For a lot of it is.
Yeah.
Currently I've got a study going at UGA, and then we're also supporting, I guess we could say we have two studies. One is completely funded by us, our formula, our concept. The other is a study that Dr. Kelsey Hart was doing anyway. She does a lot of work on antioxidants and the oxidative stress load in some of these PPID horses and insulin dysregulated horses. So she was doing a study there where incorporated two of our products into that study, and have helped with providing the product and stuff for that study. But then she's also doing another study for us on respiratory related issues. That is a new formula. The product doesn't even have a name because we have no idea if it's going to be viable or not. I mean, we've have some preliminary data back, and there's some encouraging signs. So now we're moving on to the next phase of that study. But we're probably going to be 12 months out before we have a data set. So we're probably 2 years out from that being a product if it does happen.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a long process. I feel like so many business owners, and I think it's longer for the type of product you have, but I think most people don't realize the time span from the concept of an idea to getting it to market. And it's really, like you said, you may not have had patience to be a vet, but I think it takes a certain amount of patience to guide these products to market too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you were starting out, I think it would be, well, I don't think you could survive.
Yeah.
So, the fact that we have an established company and a lot of very established products, so this is kind of going on in the background.
Right.
But, that's a very valid point as well. Just from financial stability, you have to be able to get to that point that you can maintain the company while you have these products going on, or you have to have enough financial resources going into it. So we're fortunate that, we are an established company, and that we can have this going on in the background, and it's not critical to our existence. It's critical to our future.
Right.
We have to keep growing the company, but it's not critical to today's bottom line.
Right. To make payroll next month or something.
Exactly.
And it's great that you guys have constant growth on the other products that you have, because I know, being in the pharmaceutical space myself, there's, it can go down sometimes, and the market is a little up and down at points. So it's nice to hear that you have products that have you've taken the approach where you're growing over time and you continue to grow, where it's not that, oh, we've got to get all of our sales and get all of our money back initially.
Yeah, and I think, we're fortunate in that we are a small company and we're not under pressure from shareholders or upper management, because we are the upper management. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I love that. I love being able to, they're my decisions, and I can,
you own them.
And that's my personality. I mean, I don't think anyone would really want me working for them anyway, and I don't think I could anymore after being, my own boss for so long, because I can be a bit of a bull in the china shop approach. But we definitely are fortunate, with our business structure, that we're not under those pressures that you can be under in some of the bigger companies. And so that truly is, I think, something that I want to grow, but I want to grow within reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially in our industry, and I'm sure, Jen, you see it as well, I think it's becoming a lot more corporate every day, from the distribution side, the pharmaceutical side. And I hate to see that, because I think we're very much a relationship-driven industry. And there's still fabulous people within our industry. It's the same people, but unfortunately, they are having to answer to some other people that don't necessarily understand the industry. I think that can be a little frustrating at times. And even for me, I deal with those companies on a regular basis. And again, I'm dealing with the same people, but they're frustrated because they don't have the same ability to make decisions that they were able to make 5 years ago. Now you have to go before a big committee and get everyone to sign off on it. So I think that's something I think that I see as a competitive advantage for a company like us, because when we see an opportunity, and if we think it's something that we need to go after, we're able to make that decision quickly. We're not bound by waiting for all of the approvals and
legal to take a look at it and make sure the wording's appropriate. And
so I do see that as an advantage.
I was wondering, as far as like the formulations, when you were talking about that, is that something you also work on, the actual formulation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot, along with the research. And you've published some papers. Are those in conjunction with the universities that are doing your testing and publishing papers, or have you written some papers on your own?
No, they would all be in conjunction with, whether it was universities or when I was working for Kentucky Equine Research, we published several papers. So, they would all. There would be several authors in all of those papers.
Oh yeah. And so what does that look like for you? Do you have to write a certain portion of it, or you just have to be involved in it?
Thankfully not anymore, but in my early days I did, and that wouldn't be a strength of mine. I'm much better at the vocal word than I am on trying to put my words down on paper. So thankfully I don't have to write the papers anymore. So my part in it is providing the formula and we trashing out the protocol and all of that. And the other part of it that I don't have to do anymore either, which I did have to do in my early stage, was crunching all of the numbers and the statistics part of it. And I remember when I was in university and I had to take a statistics class, and I was very adamant that this was something that I'd never need to use in my career. I have to do this, and then lo and behold, about 4 years later, I'm sitting in my office and I'm trying to figure out the statistics, and I'm like, never say never. So I'm glad to be out of that part of it, because and the universities as well, they have a lot of resources to be able to do fancy statistics and all of that. And again, the written word is not my strength. I can stand up in front of a group of people and talk and get my point across a lot better than I can trying to get it down on paper.
So would you say that you that it's an advantage that you did the written part of it to help you with your presentations, or do you think that you're just better at doing the presenting and talking?
I don't know that the writing part in its own right is giving me an advantage, but I think the whole procedure of research, which I was involved in at the early stages, from developing the protocol to actually taking the blood samples, doing the trial, to crunching the numbers, to writing the paper. I think that whole process has given me an understanding that I obviously wouldn't have had if I hadn't that background. And I think that definitely gives me an advantage. It probably gives me a little bit more confidence. To me, if you truly understand something, you can be a lot more confident.
For sure.
That some of that is just, it's embedded in me because I did it for so long that you have, I don't know if confidence is even the right word, but you have the data in there if you can just get it out of you.
Yeah.
So I think that whole time, I think, has served me extremely well. And it's a difficult job, because going back to what I said about research, that you might get one answer in 9 questions, and you may have spent 6 months doing that work, and it's hard slog, hands-on, and when you turn around and you don't get all of the answers that you thought you were going to get, that can be kind of deflating. And what can be even more deflating is if you're feeding something to a horse, say for a lot of the work that we did, we'd feed a certain diet to them for maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and then we'd have the test day. And that could be that we're taking blood samples from them every hour for 8 hours, or it could be that we were running them on the treadmill and taking all the data, including blood samples and heart rate and all that. But what can be most frustrating is that day of the study, you could have a horse that's eating the treatment every day, no problem. And for some reason, the day of the study, you feed them, and they're like, I don't feel like eating today. You're just like, you were blown months of work here. You've got to eat it. That I found, and that did happen.
That's frustrating.
Horses always try and ruin your plans, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're live animals, so it's not a computer you're dealing with that you can program it. So that could be very draining on the brain. So that to me was something that I could never do long term, because you never have control over everything, but you certainly could be made feel very humble if they decided not to cooperate on the day. So it's a tough career path.
How hard is it to abandon a product or an idea when the research comes back that doesn't support what you thought it was going to do?
As regards should we or shouldn't we, it's a pretty easy, we shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, that's never really up for debate. But I think sometimes it is difficult to abandon it. You kind of want to go, okay, well, maybe if we do this study, or we redo it, but we test these parameters. But I think after a certain amount of time, or if the data is showing no sign of encouragement, I think that, look, right now
it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can come back to it later if new things come to light. And
absolutely. And sometimes that can be 2 or 3 years later and you're focused on something else, and you think, when we were doing that other trial and we saw X, so
yeah,
it's rarely that you get nothing from a study, but it is hard to walk away, but I think the decision to do it is not that difficult to make.
Mm-hmm. That's, I think, helpful in your line of work to have like the clear-cut data to tell you, don't do this. Because I think so many people in business don't know when to abandon things, even though, I mean, I guess you could look at it from a financial standpoint, but even then we had a guest call it the sunk cost fallacy. You keep trying and trying and trying when everything's telling you need to, cut your losses and leave it behind. So I find it interesting that you guys have a better way of doing that and kind of making the decision for you and making it easier.
In theory, we do anyway, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is very important in business. And I mean, we all, I think, probably stick with some things a little longer than we should, but it is critical that you're able to just make a decision and say, this isn't working. And,
yeah.
To me, that's very important. You have to be able to, there's never any shame in getting it wrong, in my opinion. The shame will be if you've got it wrong and you keep going.
Yeah.
And that's where the shame is. Like, no matter how well you research something and you start out in a certain road, you're going to find out information that's going to redirect you some way along there, and you have to react to that. And if you don't, I mean, that's where you run into trouble. And, you've and even sometimes it means that it sets you back a year, or and I'm just talking general business, or it's going to cost you a significant amount of money. But if you become aware of more information as you're going, you got to react to it. You just have to.
And you said earlier that you do business, in the Middle East, or what challenges do you have with international sales? Kind of looking at once you have the products, you've done all the research, it works. Now you're trying to sell it to different markets. Are there challenges that for you guys to sell?
I mean, there's obvious challenges that it's totally different country, different culture. But to be honest, I love the international business, and I guess it's a benefit to me that I'm living in a foreign country. Yeah. So I've experienced different cultures, but I love the international business, and I would say the international business. A lot of the people that I do business with have now become very good friends of mine, and generally in the international markets, they want exclusivity. So it's a little bit different than it is over here. They won't take on competing lines because they get exclusivity. So they are very focused on your line, and it's in their best interest to promote it, and they know they're going to reap the benefit of it. But with that, there has to be a lot of trust. And obviously you can sign agreements, but my motto in agreements is, yes, we sign them, but being aware that an agreement is only as good as the lawyer that's going to tear it apart.
Yeah.
And every agreement can be torn apart. So there has to be trust. Because if you're just relying solely on a legal agreement, it doesn't give the fuel for a successful relationship, in my opinion. So when you develop that trust in these international markets, it becomes very much a partnership, and they want to grow the brand, and to me it's enjoyable. And you get to meet some great people as well, and exposed to different cultures. And like I say, we do a lot in the Middle East, and I go to Dubai. I used to go every year or so before COVID. And I love the place, and I've always been treated very, very well there, and very welcoming. It's just it's a great experience. It's a very nice place to visit. So, from challenges, there's obviously I think probably one of the biggest challenges is transport and the time span that it takes to get product. And COVID, was always it's long, and but COVID made that worse because there was such congestion at the ports, and getting availability and sailings was difficult. So something that would take 6 to 8 weeks, which was pretty standard from the time it would leave our warehouse here to get to the Middle East, was often taking up to 4 months.
Wow.
So it's difficult for the distributors to plan, their inventory, and then you get these panic emails saying I have to have product next week, and we need to airlift product, and I need you to help me with the cost of it, and those kind of things. I mean, those challenges. So thankfully, it seems like the congestion at the ports and some of those issues are finally starting to get a little bit better. But that's always, that's always a challenge. And their seasons are so short over there as well. They don't want to overstock because generally in Dubai, their season runs from October to March. So if they overstock, they've got several months where nothing is going to move. So it is a balancing act, but we've been doing business there for 20 plus years. So, I've got a great distributor over there who is a very good friend of mine, and we got a pretty good understanding.
Yeah. And are there restrictions when you're trying to sell internationally? Like, are there countries who might ban a certain ingredient, or how do you deal with those?
Yeah, I mean, that's a definite challenge. And we generally rely and make it the responsibility of our distributor there to work through a lot of that. We will help them, but we make it their responsibility to come back, to find out all the information and come back to us with the information. This is what we have to do. This is the paperwork that we have to submit. So we kind of put the onus on the distributor for that, because it's their country and they've got a much better understanding of it. And again, the exclusivity helps there, because obviously they don't want to help with the import process if then I'm going to go in and start selling to everybody that wants to buy products. So they know they're protected. So some countries are more difficult than others. And I would say it's becoming more difficult than it had been in the past. So it helps that we're established and we've got some registrations and stuff. But yeah, it's a process that you have to work through. And it tends to be a lot of work on the front end when you initially go into a country. There's a lot of paperwork that goes back and forth, and but then once you have it set up, it's generally just more of a renewal each year. So it's definitely most of the work is on the front end.
Has there ever been a time when you haven't been able to get your product into a country?
There's been times that we've had containers sitting at the port waiting to be cleared, and run into an issue and have to try and figure out how to get this issue resolved, and that can be sleepless nights. Again, there's always a solution. You just have to look hard enough.
Oh yeah. So I used to ship frozen semen to Europe, and it was going to Sweden, but the Swedish vet was very difficult to get the paperwork through. She was very particular, so we'd always send it to Denmark, and then they'd drive it across the border and didn't have a problem.
Yeah, see, there's always a solution. Yeah, and I'm very fortunate again with the distributors that we have. They're the type of people that think outside the box and will try and figure out a solution as opposed to just throwing up their arm. And I find with all of these authorities, if you show them that you're trying to work with them and you're trying to do it the right way, they generally will work with you and help you. It's when you try to not do it the right way, and then they have the authority to make your life hell, and they will. So we try to get it right on the front end so we don't run into issues. But there's always a challenge that comes up, but you just have to keep working on it, and finally you'll get to the right person that can give you the right information that will get you sorted.
Yeah. And for the patents that you said you have for products in the US, how does that work when you have products in other countries? Does that patent still apply there?
Not automatically, no. So there's some countries you have to file separate patents, and some countries there are agreements where you can you don't have to start from scratch.
Mm.
There's certain time spans as well that if the patent is granted here in the US, that you have to apply in the other countries within a certain time span. So it can get messy in the international, and the same with trademarks. You got to be careful with your trademarks.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had trademarks taken from us in the international market, so you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
It's because other people can trademark your product.
Right. It sounds like a lot of additional research just on that side of it, just to find out what the rules are and everywhere that you go.
Yeah, and the US intellectual property lawyers tend to be well versed in that, and we have two companies that we use, and they're very, very knowledgeable in all of that. So typically it's an email or a phone call, and they'll know the answer. So it's something that they're dealing with on a regular basis. So we're fortunate that we can tap into them for that type of information. But if you don't, you can't afford to trademark in
everywhere,
country.
Right?
Yeah, it's not financially viable. So you have to, first and foremost, you have to have that as part of your international agreements on that piece of paper that a good lawyer can tear apart. But nevertheless, you kind of, that's something that is a standard in the agreement, that they will not attempt to trademark any of your products. And then you kind of have to stay vigilant as well. And the key with it is, if someone else does trademark your product, if you catch it in the early stages, it's a lot easier to fight it than if it goes a year or two. It's a lot more difficult to fight it.
Yeah.
And it's like anything. How valuable is it to you? Because it's going to cost a lot of money to fight it, especially when it's in international markets. So, being proactive is definitely a big benefit than being reactive in those situations.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. So Dubai is a bucket list place for me to go. I really, really want to go. I've heard from several people that it's a really great place to go, but you had kind of a cool experience recently in Dubai. Can you talk about your horse that won? Yeah, it was an experience of a lifetime. I think I might finally be just coming back to earth. Yeah, I have a racehorse called Sibelius, myself and another partner that I have horses with, June Park, who's from Korea. He and I have broodmares for the most part together. We bought this horse as a short yearling, so it was in the January sale, with the mindset that we were going to put him back into September sale. And we did put him back into September sale, but nobody wanted to buy him because he was a lovely looking horse, but he had a little issue on his x-ray in his knee, and all the vets failed him. So we were left scratching our head as to what we do now, because neither the two of us had racehorses at the time. We were breeding racehorses, but we weren't intending having the actual racehorse. Well, we did end up racing him, and he's 5 now. He broke his maiden second time out at Keeneland as a 3-year-old, and then just in the last 6 months, I mean, he's just flourished into a fantastic horse. He's coming off 3 stakes wins in a row, and the last one was the Grade 1, the Golden Shaheen in Dubai. So to say that was an experience of a lifetime is probably the understatement of the century on my behalf. It was in the back of our mind at the end of last year, if he did hold his form, that that was a goal to try and get to Dubai, and he did his part. And we went over there knowing that we were running against, he's a sprinter, running against the best sprinters in the world. We knew that the way he was training, that he had the potential to run the best race of his life. What we didn't know was it going to be good enough to beat the best horses in the world? And he showed us, and the week was just fantastic over there. It was really a special experience, and they just put on
fantastic. Just the hospitality was fantastic. The horse traveled great. He traveled like he had just gone down the road. He was in his element out there. He's a very photogenic horse. And, everybody used to wait for him in the morning to come on the track, and he would just stand up there and wait for his photo to be taken. So he loved the limelight. But the race really didn't pan out as we had hoped, or the way that we thought it would need to pan out for him to win, because he generally runs from the front. In a 6 furlong race, you don't have a whole lot of time. So the plan was to get him out into the first 2 or 3 and, hope he could stay up there and hold him off. And for some reason that day, he broke really lazy, and he was a half length behind where he needed to be, and he was in the 1 hole. So they came across and cut him off, and we had every emotion in those 60 plus seconds, because we broke bad. We were just like, oh no. We were like, oh, I won't say what we were saying. But it was, we thought we were done.
Yeah.
And then Ryan Moore, who's the jockey, just gave him a fantastic ride, and he kept him on the rail, and a little gap opened, and my God, that horse I don't know how he did it, but he did it, and he passed those horses no problem. But a horse came up on the outside and nearly got him. So it was a photo finish in the end.
Wow.
We were standing right at the rail, and we thought we had it. And the trainer picked me up and swung me around, and when I landed back on the ground, it was announced that it was a photo finish. So it was it was just unreal. I mean, and there's a great group of people involved with the horse. His trainer, and he's Jerry's assistant, who's also rides him, and his groom Ricardo. Just fantastic group of people. So it was. I don't think anything can ever come close to that. I mean, hopefully, our goal now is to get him to Breeders' Cup this year. But
wow, that's so cool.
It was fantastic, and he's just a dude of a horse. He's just a big baby.
That's awesome. That's so great that you got to experience it.
Are you going to keep more now instead of selling them all?
Absolutely. We've got the bug now. So, yeah, I mean, that's the bad part of it, because you think, oh, this is easy.
Right.
No, I know it's not. So,
yeah.
But you definitely, I mean, that's sort of the feeling. And don't get me wrong, I know the chances of that ever happening again are slim, but it just... Even his wins before that, it's a fantastic feeling, I mean, it's just getting into the winners' enclosure, and it's great. So yeah, I would definitely race some more. So it'll be a nice balance, because you gotta sell something to pay for them.
Right.
It's an expensive game to be involved in, but thankfully, he's going to pay the way for a lot more. He's paid for himself and many more behind him. So again, I feel so fortunate to have ended up with a horse like him. And again, it wasn't by design, So again, things happen for a reason.
Yeah,
that's so awesome. Great. Well, we've really enjoyed talking to you and hearing about how you have gone throughout your career and the advice that you have for people maybe in similar situations. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I enjoyed chatting with you guys too.
So at the end of each episode, we ask the same 4 questions to each guest, and Connor starts with the first.
What is one action that women can take to make a big difference in their lives?
For me, I think, and I mean, this is advice for anybody, to have self-belief and confidence. And I think I was very, very fortunate. My dad instilled that in. I'm the youngest of 5, and all of us as kids, he truly believed that we had the ability to accomplish whatever we set our minds to. Mm. And I took that for granted, growing up. I just thought that's what parents did. But, just that true belief that he had in us, that is definitely transferred. And, it gives me confidence sometimes when I'm making a decision, or I'm thinking, can I do that? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can. I just work a little bit harder, and it's a risk. But so I truly think that is one of the most important things that my dad ever gave me. it's a true gift, and I think it's a big part of my success.
Yeah, love it. And what's the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
For me, I think it's to be challenged, because I perform best when I am challenged. I'm someone that I don't do good in doing the same thing all the time. I need to be given challenges, and when I'm given the challenges, I'm probably giving out about it and, stress, but I think it does bring out the best in me, and I work best under pressure. So I definitely, to me, I have to be challenged.
Yeah.
Yeah, like she gets up at 2:00 in the morning to finish presentations.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's because I was under the gun at that stage.
Yeah.
Now or never, and that's when the mind kicked in.
Yeah, I can understand that. I do that at times as well.
Yeah.
I hate it, but
Yep.
I know myself well enough by now that I just expect it.
Yeah.
You late.
What's your favorite horse movie?
I guess I would have to say Secretariat, seeing as it's the 50th anniversary of his Triple Crown win, and not that Sebelius is any Secretariat, but it's been a fairy tale story for me, so I think I would have to go with that one.
Awesome.
And who would you recommend to be a future guest on this podcast?
Yeah, this is a difficult one because there's so many great people out there, but I think I would recommend Dr. Spike Pierce from Rood and Riddle, because she was and is such a fantastic veterinarian and so well respected in the orthopedic side of things and what she focused on, and now she stepped into the role as a CEO of a huge clinic with several different clinics throughout the country. So I think, and I know she's a horse person true and true, comes from a standardbred background, so I think she will be a very, very interesting person to have on.
Awesome. Thank you. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I very much enjoyed it, so I appreciate the opportunity.
I really enjoyed talking with Delia. I know you knew her prior to this interview, but it was cool to hear about, her education and all the different things that she's done leading up to her current position. And you can tell she does have the passion for it.
Yeah, she really is passionate about it. She's a good speaker. And I really loved how she started out talking about taking a wrong turn that made the right turn, because that happens so many times to people. And, some people admit it and some people don't, but she kind of owns it. And I think that it's really made her who she is and gotten her where she is at this point.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. She said, I didn't absolutely love working purely in the, laboratory clinical side of things, but all of that, experience makes her confident and able to, make good choices in what she does now.
Yeah. And it's a tough position too, because, she has to be an expert and present to veterinarians. And I think that the nutraceutical space is a little bit different than, say, what I do in pharmaceuticals, because we have all these steps with FDA approvals that we have to go through. And it's nice that her company does all the research and the studies that they do to prove that their products are good. I think that it's a little different than where my position is in a pharmaceutical company, because the FDA approvals that we have to go through, nutraceutical space is a little bit different. And I think that it's great that her company does all the research that they do and all the testing that they do in order to put out great products. And I think that that's what makes her such an expert in the things that she does, but also being able to stand up and talk in front of veterinarians, which I think can be a little bit difficult when you don't have that pharmaceutical that you're trying to sell. When it's a nutraceutical, getting veterinarians on board can be a little bit more difficult, because there's so many different products and it's kind of a packed space. And she really has gained the respect of a lot of veterinarians in the field. So I think that comes from, her being her research and really being a company that stands behind their products.
Right. I liked her talking about when to abandon a product and when to know that it's not right at this time. And I really like the thought of, okay, it's not working now, but maybe in 2 years when there's different research or there's new ways of putting ingredients together, or a new ingredient pops up that you didn't know would work with something else. And I think that can be translated to other businesses in saying, if it's something that interests you and something you feel strongly about, okay, it may not work right now, but it may work down the line.
Yeah.
And not to completely shut it out if you think that it's something worthwhile. Recognize that it's not working right now and that you need to stop, either spending a ton of money or time on it and come back to it when you can.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's such an important point. And I also liked her point about, the steady growth and the 3 years. The 3 years was making me think of Adele and how, the Women in Business show, we're going to give it 3 years to make something work. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of along the same lines. With Delia's company, and that, they see the growth over the first 3 years and then it continues to grow. And it's not this like huge shoot up and spike. So for me, it's kind of like, I think that's like such a good business plan, because so many times you see people go all out and then they hit a plateau. Yeah. And, I think that being able to just maintain growth over time is really important.
More of slow and steady wins the race mindset. And, if you're going to be a company that stands behind its products and, has to put so much time into bringing something to market, I think you have to give it the time to have proper growth in sales. And I think that's kind of what seems like their business model. So it was cool to hear her background, and I loved hearing the story about her racehorse. That was so cool.
I know. And, I totally get what she's talking about, like how surreal it can be, right? So I went to the Kentucky Derby a few years ago, and it was the best experience ever. So much so I'll probably never go back, because you could never recreate the experience that I had. I had a friend who had a horse he was training that was in the Derby. His name is Tax. And he invited us to come down, and he gave us all these passes to all these little private parties and areas in the grandstand. And we went and did that. But for the actual race, we didn't really have a particular seat, but he had hooked us up with this gentleman who was, one of the track photographers, but he happened to not be a photographer that day because he was coming back from some kind of injury, surgery or whatever. So he was hanging out with us the whole day. And just when the race started and it had rained, just when the race was going to go off, he was like, oh, we have to run up and be in the grandstand for when they sing and bring the horses out. And we did. And we ended up in a box on the finish line that nobody was using.
Wow.
And it was so cool and then people were in boxes next to us. They're like, oh my God, you're here with Dax. Oh yeah, we're going to cheer for him. And so it was so cool. And I was like, oh, I would never be able to afford the tickets to be on the box on the finish line. And there was this empty box, and we just walked right in and boom, watched the race from there. And it was incredible. So for Delia to go to Dubai and have all of that taken care of in the hospitality, and then your horse to win it is incredible.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Yeah. And you know what? Good for her. She's a small breeder and, small owner to win a big race like that. I'm that's just so exciting. It gave me chills when she was talking about it, honestly.
Really cool.
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of things going on, so I'm going to run, but you can find the links to today's guest and the show notes at www.eqbusinesswomen.com. Equestrian B2B is out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th.
You can find out more at eqbusinesswomen.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Find Equestrian B2B wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review so others can find us as well. You can have all 20 plus shows of the Horse Radio Network with you wherever you go with their free app for iPhone and Android. Go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network.
Now go do your research.